I'll let the panel introduce themselves. Renate Kohlmann is going to run the panel. She knows what she's talking about. Also, can you see those questions?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so we're going to run the questions up as well so the panel can take questions. So without further ado, Renate Kohlmann, and she will introduce the panel for you. Thank you very much.
That's great, thank you very much. We'll get straight onto it. We have about a half an hour. My name is Renate Kohlmann. I've travelled here today from Ballinasloe, East Galway. I'm the chapter lead for Grow Remote. I'm delighted to welcome the panel here today, and again to thank them all from travelling from different parts of the country. We have a great mixture, so we have Enda Regan from Shopify. Enda is a team lead with Shopify, and he's going to be able to talk a little bit about what it's like to run teams, to manage people, what's the career development plans and so on within companies, and talk a little bit about what the skill sets are, help us to understand what they are. We also have Angela. We have Angela Piper. She's the head of HR from a company called Scrapinghub. Scrapinghub is an Irish-based company down in Cork, so she's going to talk to us a little bit about the development there and talk about, the skill sets and the company there. Delighted also that we have Denis. Denis Curran is the head of regional development for the IDA, and John was just talking there about the asks for the IDA, and Denis is going to be able to talk about the conversations that he's having with companies and how he can help and drive that overall cohesive strategy as well for remote. And we have Paul Simpson. Paul is the Director for Sales and Service in Wayfair. And Wayfair is a US-based company, but here in Ireland. So I'm going to hand over the mic. You'll have to sort of share that out as we go along. And I guess, first question maybe to yourself, Paul, would be, can you tell us a little bit about, introduce what you do, what your role is, what Wayfair does, and talk to me about, and to the audience, about the virtual team in Wayfair and why that's important for the company and so on.
Yeah, so we pretty much support, I suppose, online customer service queries globally. We're in marketplaces in the US, Canada, UK, and Germany presently. So our teams span across, I suppose, that 24/7 supporting customer queries or sales opportunities. So our virtual model has pretty much been established in the US. Presently have about 800 that are working across the US in various states. 12 months ago, I joined Wayfair to set up a European model of virtual workers. We're circa 300 at the moment. Pretty much 180 of those sit in Ireland, and 120 roughly sit in Germany. So that's pretty much why we kind of went into the market, was really around the fact that customer demand, 24/7 online shopping. I hope you all participated in Way Day last week and made some purchases, but ultimately we had customers still shopping to our close date at 3 a.m. in the morning. So it pretty much, that's the demand we have to meet in a very customer-centric organisation. So our virtual model gives us that flexibility and scale to meet that demand.
It's great. So Paul and his team are dealing with customers every day. Could you help understand maybe a little bit about what the skill sets are like on a daily basis, and what kind of roles? Is it sales, service? Are there other kind of roles that people could do for Wayfair working remotely?
Yeah, so virtually we have the customer service role, which is really about supporting customers with their queries across the UK and German marketplace. But when we set the model up, we made sure it was 100% virtual. So all our IT, recruitment teams, training teams, leadership teams are all virtual. We've got engagement specialist teams that help us with that virtual experience. So a big kind of reliance on collaborative tools. We've created a social hub for that, and then ultimately how we kind of interact. It's very important for us to stay connected and a sense of presence and inclusion with our teams as we launch this model.
Super, great. Thanks, Paul. May I hand over to Angela? Just hold on, Denis, for a moment. Going to come on to the IDA part then. Scrapinghub. I mean, who has heard of Scrapinghub? We've a lot of new companies' names that they're not traditional company names. They maybe don't traditionally do. They maybe don't do the traditional types of roles that you're used to. So I'd love for Angela just to explain, well, what is Scrapinghub? What do you do? And again, what kind of roles can you offer to people?
Okay, so Scrapinghub is an Irish organisation. We're 100% remote, and our mission is to provide open access to web data. So we do data extraction.
Okay.
I think right now have about 170 people 70 are based all over Ireland, and the rest are in several locations through the world. So we have two types of employees. So we have the technical people, who are the software developers. And then we have the support groups, which are HR, finance, marketing, sales, legal, and administration.
Okay.
So, and everybody's 100% remote.
Okay. So I could be experienced in any of these roles, and I could do. So it's not just, sometimes we think it's the development roles that you have to be a programmer or a software developer. You have to be highly technical. They're not all technical roles. So these are roles that traditionally would have been done in a bricks and mortar type office, and now they can be done remotely. Okay, I think that's fantastic, and I think that really helps to explain what the nature of the roles all are across the board. Super. Thank you, Angela. And Enda, would you talk to us a little bit about Shopify? John was up earlier on. He wasn't going to do the Shopify spiel, so you get to do it. Tell us who you guys are, and explain a little bit about your own role and, how one can develop one's career. Because sometimes people ask, well, is that a real job? Like, what is remote? Does that come with benefits? Is that something that I can only do for a while? It's nomadic, or will I actually get anywhere? Out of sight is out of mind. Will I be eligible for promotions? Is there a career path? All those kind of questions a lot of people have. So if you could let us know a little bit about that, that'd be great, Enda.
Cool. I kind of feel a bit of pressure with John sitting down there now, to be honest. So with Shopify, we're over 300. I can't remember the exact number, we're 320 or even nearly 350 at this stage, all remote in Ireland. And we work in customer success. Where Wayfair works in customer support, Shopify works in customer success, because the merchants that we use, or that we help and assist on a daily basis, these are people with their own business. These are people who it could be their actual 9 to 5, or it could be their side hustle that they're trying to get up and running. So our job is to help these merchants be successful and be online entrepreneurs. So as a result of that, the pressure that we have, are kind of it's not even necessarily the pressure that we have, but the way we look at things is that we have the potential to have absolutely massive and positive impact on people's lives, but doing that sitting in our own house. And for me personally, in the metropolis that is Boyle, that, you know what I mean? So that's kind of the way it is. So, but even just a bit on my own background, just as was asked there. So I'm actually, since IT Sligo was mentioned, I'm a graduate of IT Sligo, and did business, specialised in marketing. So when I came out of college, I straight away started working professionally in the marketing sector. So I was a marketing executive for a couple of different companies. And I was working actually in the tourism sector in Boyle as a marketing exec, and it just came the time for me to move on. I just needed to move on. So at that stage, I was looking around. I got a job as a marketing exec in a company called the European SharePoint Conference in Galway, and fantastic place. But at the same time, when I was looking for that job, I found out about Shopify. And I was like, wow, okay, right. So this is e-commerce. This is where everyone is going. This is where the world is moving. So in terms of my own career progression, I thought, in terms of marketing and stuff like that, I need to get into this space. I have got to get here in terms of my own progression. So thankfully, they liked me, they gave me a job, so I was happy out. So I was able to actually move back home, which made my life at least 200% easier, because I have a lot of things going on personally. I'm involved in different things and all that kind of jazz. And it just made my life 200% easier. So just even as you're saying about career progression, that people think with remote work, that, right, are you just getting that job and is that it? Is that where you can go? In the space of time, I've been with Shopify 3 years. I have got, obviously, my new job and two promotions and a number of pay rises. And so I'm not saying I'm on serious cash or anything like that, but I'm not wearing a Rolex anyway, that's all. But it's just to show that it is available to people, and progression is there. Okay. And it's the same as if you work anywhere else. If you work hard, you do what you got to do, and you put out your idea. I want to be moving here. This is what I want, and I'm good at these kind of things. It will happen. It's
great. As we come back along the panel, and just one more comment from yourself before we move on, because one of the questions that come up there is about how do you build a team? So, you know, you're managing a team of people, and as I understand it there, at the moment, you've got them in 2 different locations, obviously country geographically as well. So how do you actually go and create that, build a team, and how do people feel connected and engaged and part of the organisation?
So I could talk for about 2 hours on that alone.
You've got 2 minutes.
I have 2 minutes, Jesus. So at the minute, I'm lead for a department in Shopify called Kit. So basically it's marketing automation. We can help people market their store. So I originally was lead for Ireland, so I had 6 on my team. But my colleague, who is based in San Francisco, she has actually had to take some personal time. So now my team has grown to 14. So now I have 6 in Ireland. I have 3 kind of East Coast Canada, and then the rest are based in San Francisco. So you're kind of like, right, how in the name of good God is a man managing a team like that from Boyle and doing it effectively? So about building a team remotely, it's very, very simple in my own mind, is that, number one, figure out what you want to do. Figure out what you want your team to do, and are they going to be effective at it? And number 2, by all means, and this is paramount, give them autonomy. Autonomy. Don't be one of those kind of like, you know, a quintessential manager and be looking over people's shoulders and telling people what to do. In Shopify, we don't call ourselves managers or anything like that. We're leads. Okay, so the way we actually talk about that is that you lead someone. So if you're a manager, you can have a one-size-fits-all approach, but when you're a lead, you have to be a different lead to every single person on your team, because every single person reacts to things in a different way. Yeah. So give them autonomy to do what they got to do, and what they will do, what you will get back is 10x then. Mm-hmm. That is what I've seen on my own, because like I have a simple thing with my guys. I say to them, guys, I do not give a toss what you do or when you do it. I simply do not care. All I say is that every time we have a bi-weekly check-in, I want to see progress. That is it. Nothing else. I'm not going to ask, where are you, what are you doing? Go out, have a coffee, work in the coffee shop, do whatever you got to do. One of my guys actually has a boat. He loves working on the boat. I'm like, grand. Would you invite me the next time? But like, that's it. Give them autonomy, and that's it. That's one of the main things. But again, I probably won't get to talk more, but if anyone has more questions about that, ask me afterwards.
Super. Thanks, Enda. If you pass back to Angela. And Angela, I guess, same kind of question with yourself is like, how do you build a team and how do you train? I know a lot of your people are going to come in and they're already sort of fully trained for the job, but how do you train the team and get them ready to work and build the team environment and engagement?
So I guess the first thing we need to do is trust our people. And that's really important. And then there are a number of things that we can do. So there are certainly, you know, the basic skills that somebody will need to come in and to do their job on the everyday basis. From my perspective, the biggest piece to go with that is behaviors. So it's behaviors like communication, behaviors like how you own the work you do, how you take accountability and responsibility for your work. And I suppose to put that into the bigger perspective, if you can imagine you're sitting in an office and, you know, somebody beside you has, I don't know, a query on how to work something out on Excel or something, well, then you'll go to, you know, into how do you work out Excel. But you know, think then that you're in a remote environment, you're probably at home with nobody around, then what's the behavior that you need to have within yourself to know what to do on that occasion? And it's pretty much Google and figure out what you can do or try and reach out to somebody. So it's those behaviors are just as important as having the technology and the skills that's needed for your everyday role.
So when you're talking about autonomy, accountability, trust, it must mean that you put a lot of extra effort into the onboarding and the interview process and recruitment process. Yeah. Do you think you have, you know, certain elements contained within that that's going to demonstrate that? Because clearly working from home isn't for everybody, right? And some people kind of need that different kind of a focus or maybe more of a metrics kind of driven organization. So in your space and also in Enda's is a little bit different. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, I suppose our philosophy also, of course, is to measure output, not hours. Okay. So we don't have people, you know, clocking in from 9 until 5 or whatever. You know, as Enda says, we don't care where they work from or when they work, just to get the job done. Yeah. So then I suppose as well as that, you know, we, as part of the interview process, and there are different processes for our technology people rather than the non-technical people. So there are technical trials. So for the developers, they need to provide some code. And then the whole interview process is, firstly, it's a HR interview to see whether somebody is a culture fit, one for the organisation, but also for remote working, because it's not for everybody. And then they go through that, and then they have a conversation with probably the team lead, and then maybe a function manager. But it is all about how, they can, work in the remote perspective. But we also do all of our interviews through Google Hangouts. We do not do telephone interviews, and for the majority of our employees, we don't necessarily meet them before we even employ them. It's all done through Google Hangouts.
So it's really interesting, right? Because in the traditional way, you'd go in, you'd have an interview, you might have a second interview, third interview into the office, and in today's world, it's all done over video. So, a lot of our generation, or generation before me, I'm in the dinosaur age, but grow up with social media, right? And they're always taking selfies and doing videos and, sending Snapchats back and forth. So they're used to that, right? But for somebody who's maybe not, do you find that people say that's a bit of a daunting process for some people to have to do video interviews and things like that? Is it something you're finding?
It is. Absolutely, for sure. I mean, I know when I joined, Scrapinghub in 2017, even for me, it was slightly daunting, having come from, I suppose the multinationals, to go into 100% remote working. It is a little bit daunting, but I suppose that's where then it's very important for us to have a really good onboarding process, to have all of the team leaders and team managers, engaged in how we do this, and to make sure that we have regular check-ins with our people. For sure, it's absolutely daunting.
Super. Okay. Thank you very much. Well, before we come to Paul, we let Denis have the mic, and John had a number of questions, I know, and I'm not asking you to answer them all here, but perhaps you could, you might have some thoughts on it, which you'd be happy to share, but if you can talk to us a little bit about, the IDA is so important in bringing foreign direct investment, and, around the table we have a number of companies that have benefited from that, and we benefit from that as well. So there's already a great track record there, of working with the companies and having those conversations. What's your thought process, or where are the IDA at now in terms of driving that forward and bringing more companies who are existing to move them to shift into this modus operandi, or having those conversations with companies as they come in and so on? Can you share a little bit about that, please?
Sure. First of all, I'd just like to acknowledge Tracy and everybody from Grow Remote for putting the event on today. It's great to see a packed house, and it's great to see it happening here in Tubbercurry in Sligo, and it's something that IDA are strongly supportive of. Maybe just before I just touch on some of the points that you mentioned there, and maybe John mentioned as well. So IDA, we work with around 1,300 companies, and they employ around 230,000 people directly, and you can probably add an indirect job as well for every direct job that's created. So at the moment, 58% of all that employment is located in the regions outside of Dublin, and it's at an all-time high. And what we're tasked in doing is simply put, to grow that 58% figure, to try and get more and more companies to create employment and to create economic growth in the regions. And we're looking at new platforms and new pathways to try and enable that to happen. And one of them is remote working, or home working, or shared working in co-location spaces. And I would say that it's at the moment it's at an embryonic stage.
Yes.
That the level of acceptance, depending on the sector and the companies within each sector and the culture of each of the companies, there's different viewpoints on it. Today, and I would say conservatively, we would probably have just under 3,000 people within the portfolio that are maximising the benefit of home working and remote working. And we're seeking to build on that. On one or two things that John mentioned, and I know he mentioned the national media, and rightly to quote the fantastic announcement by Salesforce, but maybe we need to do a better job of talking about some of the stuff that's happening from a regional media perspective as well. We've just closed out in our first quarter, and if I look from a regional development perspective, and I don't want to get too defensive on it here now, but if I try and go down the Wild Atlantic Way here, the Donegal Democrat reporting on Amazon's investment in Donegal, along with California and Sweden as part of their global renewable energy strategy, the Sligo Champion talking about GW Plastics investment in Sligo, the Mayo News in terms of what Mezzanine are going to do in Castlebar in Mayo, the Tuam Herald, the largest autonomous vehicle engineering site in Ireland, where Valeo are going to invest 44 million in PhD, masters and degree jobs in the area of AI, machine learning to do with autonomous vehicles, and then into Limerick and the Limerick Leader reporting on Edward Life Sciences and Johnson & Johnson. Between them, 800 new jobs in terms of their facilities there. So there's a lot, equally important for me as head of regional development and my colleagues from IDA here. It's okay, the big sort of announcements get reported in the national media, but there's a lot happening from a regional perspective too. And what we want to do is bring the positive experience that the exemplars beside me and the people that have gone and done it in terms of establishing remote working teams, and they're proof positive that you can successfully establish and scale remote working teams across Ireland. And we want to bring their knowledge, experience and positivity to both our existing client base and our new client base about the opportunities that are available for them in Ireland.
Sounds great. And just a final comment in terms of, we know there's a number of different players. It's like there are green shoots everywhere. Many organizations are getting involved and want to contribute, and they're looking for that path forward, like how do we do this? And John was talking about pulling together a cohesive strategy. So is it something that you see like working more closely with obviously Enterprise Ireland, IDA, looking at the other partners as well and pulling that together? Is that something on the roadmap?
From an organization perspective, we've definitely embraced the concept of remote working as a key pillar and pathway to creating jobs in the region. The traditional manifestation of inward investment in the regions has been, to John's point, a physical building, an IDA business park, etc., and people employed in those buildings. But it can be, it can be people working from any part of the country, and they don't have to be working in an IDA business park or an IDA building. And as part of that, we have done a heat map in terms of all the remote working spaces. And in fact, in Sligo, we had launched the landing space, which Alan and John took a lead on, and that's one of our pioneering facilities. And we're going to be working with local stakeholders and regional authorities and county council, economic development departments as well, and finding co-location spaces across the country. We've already mapped 200 of them, and we're sharing that data and intelligence with investors. And we're also working with private sector recruitment companies on a regional basis to get more market intel around the types of people and types of skill sets and the capabilities that reside within the regions, and how people can tap in to that particular skill set that currently resides in the regions. But I'll go a bit further too, in addition to what John said. Not alone do we need to tap into the current capability that resides within the regions, that we need to make regions more attractive to tackle or to attract international talent into the country. There's over 2 million people working in Ireland today. 17% of those people weren't born in this country, and if you map those figures against the tech community, I think it's 23% or more. And there's a global war for talent, and if we are to remain competitive in attracting high-tech companies, creating high-tech jobs, and those jobs are going to be regionally dispersed, each community in each region must build the social, economic and educational infrastructure in partnership with ourselves and everybody else to make those particular regions attractive, to build a career, to build a life, and to be educated as well.
It sounds really like a task force. I mean, imagine if you had everyone in this room was a task force that came to Tubbercurry, and then you took them to another region, and just imagine what momentum you would build. And I think it's, the examples from this event is what can be recreated and is being recreated, across the country as well. So, Paul, you have a comment on that?
Validate, because I think this is my second time that I've set up a remote kind of function in Ireland, and the first time we did it in 2010 when I worked for Amazon. Partnered heavily with Ray Connor in the Munster area, and they went to those guys, they tailored heat maps, everything, and eventually we set up 50-strong team out of Bantry. I don't know if you've ever been to Bantry, beautiful part of the world. But ultimately, you know, that partnership was really critical in us setting that up within Amazon, and then we replicated that community model across Germany, Bratislava, Cape Town of all places, and in America eventually. But I think with Wayfair, it's been, you know, with Wesley Kelly, who's here today, I think if you haven't engaged the guys, while they're probably getting their synergies right, just go to them with your asks, because they've got all that information. They partner really strongly with you, so I really encourage that.
Super, super. Well, I know we're just on time here, so I'm going to ask maybe one word from each on the panel, just in terms of the question that's up there, which is, can you tell us a little bit about the skill sets that's needed? You know, I know there are different roles, but is there, you know, are there one or two sort of overarching, you know, skills that really you're looking for when it comes to working remotely? Paul, if you want to start, and we'll go back across.
Just one.
You can give two. If it's three, we'll go with three.
I think ultimately, I think there's got to be a passion for working remotely. I think you're really looking for that person to be, I suppose, an advocate for it.
Yes.
And you might say, well, how do you measure that? I think you really want to, in the interview process, be talking about then what they see their day as.
Yes.
And ultimately how this fits into their lives, I think, from what we were talking earlier with the Scrapinghub example. And then I think ultimately, you know, to give trust, you've got to have an element of that this person demonstrates accountability, right?
Super.
So especially in a customer facing, when they're in live calls or live emails, you ultimately have got to trust this person. So they're probably the two that I would definitely look for.
Thank you. And Dennis, maybe from your conversations with companies, are they asking for specific traits?
Yeah, well, maybe what I might do is I might just leave that to the practitioners that are out there recruiting the people. But in terms of job families that we see where companies are scaling capability, it would have started off probably with customer support, contact center type roles. We've seen that move into inside sales and into multilingual inside sales, and people delivering pan-European customer support and inside sales from Ireland. And then we're seeing it you know, across all the software engineering skill set and that family as well.
Yes.
And you know, in addition to the services and the engineering capability within our portfolio, we do have a lot of companies carrying out advanced manufacturing, and a lot of people might think, well, look, that you can't remote work from advanced manufacturing. You need to be in a building, physically making stuff on an assembly line, etc. But at the advanced element of the manufacturing part of that, we are seeing more AI and more smart manufacturing, and a lot of that has been technology-led, and the technology underpinning that can be developed from a remote working capability as well. So we're pursuing that with clients as well.
Exciting stuff. Thank you. Angela, yeah.
Okay, so for me, it's for sure trust, communication, ownership, execution. Those are the four things.
Excellent. Well done. Thank you. And Enda, final word to you on the traits.
I would say, well, trust is number one. Absolutely. But aside from that, motivation. Someone who is incredibly motivated. One of the things, like when we go through hiring, like even from hiring on my own team, I'm fairly pedantic about that. Like, you know, I need people who are highly motivated. And this kind of sounds a little bit weird, but I kind of nearly lean to someone who might be a little bit older. For the reason being that there's a question there saying, like, if remote work isn't for everyone. I honestly don't think, I think it is. I think it is actually for absolutely everyone. But my point is that I kind of think that, like, with someone older who has, to be honest, like, you know, been through in the office, had the bit of a boss who was a you-know-what, you know what I mean, that, like, can get away from that, and they can see what remote work will give them. So as a result, like, you know, have kids, have family, all that kind of jazz, that they will actually have a bit more weight on remote work, that the balance that is given to them in their personal life. So as a result of that, and I could be attested to this because I have people on my team like this, when people appreciate that and they see what remote work has given them, you will get a person who is so motivated, hyper motivated, and you will get everything back 10x. So that's kind of one of the key things that I've learned anyway.
That's fantastic. Well, listen, I wanted to thank you all so much for coming down. Thank you for all the updates as well. And, you know, come and talk to them during the coffee break or over lunch, and hope that that's given you some more insights, what it's like from an employee perspective, also from a company perspective, and helping making that work in the community. So thank you all very much.